Going to be speaking today from the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verses 1 through 19. And I know that y'all have never read this before. Have you? This is the first time you've ever heard it. Right? Okay, man, wait, we got to get something started right here. I believe in interactive sermons. If I ask a question, I expect a response. So, have y'all ever read John 21 before? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. But you may not have read it the way we're going to talk about it today. After these things, what things? We just heard about it last week, and we talked about it again just a few minutes ago with children. After these things, that's when Jesus was talking to Thomas and the disciples in Jerusalem. But after those things were over, the disciples, they went up to the Sea of Tiberias. Where is the Sea of Tiberias? We know of it as the Sea of Galilee. It's called many things. Luke sometimes refers to it as Lake Gennesaret. And we hear of it as the Sea of Galilee, and here we see of it the Sea of Tiberias. But he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas, you remember the doubting Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, James and John. Nathanael of Cana. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. How many of y'all like to fish? Got a few here. North Carolina is a great place to go fishing. My dad, who's from over Newbern way, he loved to go fishing. I never did like it. All those slimy fish and the worms you got to stick on the hook. But my dad loved it, and most of my family still enjoys it. Well, Simon Peter says, I'm going to go fishing. And they said to him, we'll go with you. And they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. I mean, zip, zero, zilch. They didn't have a bite. You ever had that experience when you're fishing? Yeah, it happens more often than you want. Even in times of Jesus, that happened. So, just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach. But the disciples didn't know that it was Jesus. I mean, he was, after all, a ways away, and here they are out fishing still. And Jesus said to them, children, you have no fish, have you? Well, how did he know? How did Jesus know they didn't have any fish? And they answered him, no, and he said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. And that disciple whom Jesus loved, what was his name? John. Thank you. We got to have volume here. That disciple whom Jesus loved, John, let's see. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. And Peter heard that it was the Lord. He put on some clothes, for he was naked. Now, what he was doing in the boat fishing when he was naked, it must have been hot. Must not have only been hot, it must have been darn hot, even at night. So he jumps into the sea, but the other disciple came to the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. And when they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with some fish on it and some bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of that fish you've just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish. And they give us a number. Somebody went and counted those fish. There was 153 of them. Must have been quite a haul of fish. That's a lot of fish. And though there were so many, the net was not torn, and Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. And Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them and did the same with the fish. This was now the third, we're going to see this number a lot. This was the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Last week we heard of the first 2 times, right? He came to the disciples in the upper room there, and there was everybody there except for Judas, who had gone and did himself in, and for Thomas. Then he comes again the second time, and Thomas was there. Now it's the third time. And when he had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." And the second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Tend my sheep." And he said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter was hurt because he said to him the third time, we have another third here, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go to wherever you wish, but when you grew old, you'll stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten the belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." And he said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. And after this he said to Peter, "Follow me." Well, why did Jesus ask 3 times to Peter, "Peter, do you love me?" Well, we kind of link it. It doesn't say it in here, but we link it to what happened right after Jesus' trial. Peter's denial. He denied Jesus how many times? 3. 3 times Peter denied him. When someone asked him, "Do you know that man?" "I know you know that man." And every time Peter said, "I don't know him. Never heard of him. Who is he?" Peter denied even knowing Jesus. 3 times he denies him. And so Jesus, when he is back with Peter, he asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" And of course, when he asked him that first time, "Peter, do you love me?" the immediate, automatic response is, "Oh, sure, Lord, I love you." But a little thing we don't see here in the English language is a difference in their words for love. Because when Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" he uses the word agape. Most of us have heard that word. It's a Greek word, and it means an all-encompassing love, a kind of a spiritual love. And Peter, when he responds, answers with another Greek word for love, phileo. And phileo is where we get the word philanthropy, and it's a kind of a brotherly love. "Yes, Lord, I'm fond of you. I regard you as a brother." But he doesn't say, "I agape you." And when Jesus asks a second time, "Peter, do you love me? Do you have me as an agape love?" Peter must have thought, well, okay, he must mean something different. But Peter answers him the same way. And that third time, Jesus switches words. And he says, "Peter, do you phileo me? Do you love me as a brother?" And Peter says, "Yes." And that seems to be enough. Now, why would Jesus ask 3 times if he was loved? Maybe we ought to ask ourselves that question. Maybe we ought to ask, "Helen, do you love me? Mary, do you love me? Melissa, do you love me? Don, Rob, do you love me?" We imagine Jesus asking us that question ourselves, do you love me? And what is he asking us? Y'all ever watch Fiddler on the Roof? Okay. If you haven't watched Fiddler on the Roof, that's your homework. When you go home sometime this afternoon, this evening, you pull up on YouTube or you pull up on Netflix, Fiddler on the Roof. It's a great play. And it's about a Jewish family in Russia. Anatevka is the dad of the family. And he has a whole brood of daughters. And the idea is, in that day and time and in that culture, when you want to get married, you don't fall in love with the nearest boy from high school. Love has nothing to do with marriage. How they were married was Daddy and Mama would talk with a matchmaker and they'd find you a match. Okay? And they'd assign you a spouse. Now, doesn't that just sound like fun? Having Mommy and Daddy pick your spouse, your husband or your wife for you? Well, his daughters didn't think much of that idea, and they fell in love with different people, and one was a sewer, and one was a Christian. One was a politician kind of guy. And finally, this idea of loving your spouse kicked up enough that Anatevka's wife asks him one day, "Do you love me?" And all of a sudden the scene stops and Anatevka remembers things about whether or not, all the things that he has done for her and the family, and finally realizes that yes, he loves her. I know when as teenagers, generally it's the woman, but sometimes it's the man who says to the other guy, "I love you." First time it's normally, this wonderful feeling, "I love you." And you're kind of expecting the other guy to say, "Well, I love you too." But do we? We saw that Jesus loves us. We saw that Jesus loved us so much that he went to the cross and he died, he suffered for us, for Peter. He died for Peter. His disciples could have run to the rescue, called out Superman and Batman and the American heroes of the world, and they could have come to the rescue and saved Jesus from the cross. But they ran away. And Peter denied him. "Peter, do you love me?" What does that really mean? That means that I'm going to stand up for you. In the future, I'll never run away again. I will come for you. I will rescue you. I will say to the world, "Yes, Lord, I love you. I am a Christian. I am a follower of you. I will do what you need me to do." Now, in today's world, it's easy to be a Christian, isn't it? All you do is join a church sometime during your life and you come to church 1 hour a week. It's easy to be a Christian in today's world because we answer yes to that first question, "Clay, do you love me?" And I say, "Yeah." But I don't really have to do anything to say that. It's an automatic response, just like Peter did. But then the Lord asks a second time, "Do you love me? Will you commit your life to me?" When your spouse asks you that question, it means forever, right? I don't love you for the first year of our marriage and then I'll fall out of love. I don't love you just so I can have a place to call home. I don't love you just because we can have a good physical relationship. I love you forever. And when we're angry with each other, we still love each other. Right? When we are disappointed in each other, I still love you. We're going to get through everything. We're going to get through the hard times. We're going to get through the difficult times because we love each other. That's what Jesus is asking Peter. Not will you deny me at the first opportunity, but will you love me even though a Roman soldier wants to persecute you? Even though it's hard to love someone. It's hard to love Jesus sometimes. Christians throughout the centuries, the last 1,500 years or so, have had it easy. We have been a common seed generation, and we have allowed everybody else to exist outside of the walls and outside of the churches, and so we have invited them in. But Jesus says, follow me. Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel. Tell the good news. Tell them that you love me. Tell them why you love me. That's hard. That's not as easy. We'd rather sit in our comfortable pews. They are comfortable, right? Your pews are comfortable? Okay, everybody's comfortable where they are. We got another half an hour to go. So are you comfortable? Okay. Just kidding. Do you love me? The third time, Jesus asks Peter, do you love me? Sometimes the hardest thing to do in life is not to love, but to be loved. You ever think about that? To accept someone else's love for you. That's hard, really. Because you have to accept the fact that someone is going to love you even though you've done bad things, even though you've done wrong things, even though you're not perfect. And maybe tonight you're going to go to the bar and drink your fill of beer and come home waddling home. Honey, I'm home. Is there a bed here? Or you might go this afternoon to your local drug dealer and shoot it up. Oh, honey, I'm home. We have a lot of ways that we do bad things. We might cheat on the next test at school. That's a bad thing. We might lie to a coworker at our office. It's a bad thing. We are not perfect people. We make mistakes. Peter, do you love me? Do you love me enough that you're going to accept my love? That I'm going to love you regardless of what you do and what you've done? That I forgive you for the 3 times you have denied me? That I still love you? Will you accept my love and put that behind you and go on with your life? Peter, do you love me? And Peter said, yes, Lord. I love you. And who was the greatest disciple of them all? Who went to more people and more countries and said to them, I want to tell you about Jesus of Nazareth? Who loved Jesus so much that when he was confronted by the Roman government in Rome itself, the seat of power, he said, still, I do not deny Jesus. I love him. I serve him. He is my master. And they said, okay, you're dead. And they put Peter on the cross. But before they did, he said to them, that's how my Lord died. I can't be crucified like that. Hang me upside down. And so they hung Peter upside down because he loved God so much. So think of it this afternoon. And there's another way I want y'all to express your love for Jesus. That little piece of paper that's on your bulletin covers about the crop walk. I want you to all to put something on there and put it in the offering plate today. because I have been hungry and not known where my next meal is coming from. A lot of you have been in that shoe yourself. Hunger is a big problem in the world, and there is no excuse in the world today, with all the modern technology and with all the money rolling around, that anybody should go to bed hungry, and yet they do. And we as Christians are called upon by Jesus Christ himself when he said to Peter, "Do you love me?" And Peter said, "Yes." What did Jesus say? "Feed my sheep." Let us feed the sheep of Christ by our actions here today. Before you leave, either walk with us or pay a little money, maybe $20, so we can get those supplements sprinkled on the food. $100 so that we could dig a well. Water is a very important resource. As a sailor, I have been to the Philippines, and I've been to Pattaya Beach, Thailand, and those places, and I made the mistake one day of having a Pepsi-Cola. Y'all like Coke and Pepsi? Mountain Dew? Dr. Pepper? You ever put ice in it? Oops is right. I had ice in my Coca-Cola. Now, there was nothing wrong with the Coca-Cola, but the ice was a little tainted. I was sick for a month. It was coming out of both ends. Water is an important resource. And if your water is tainted, like those folks in Flint, Michigan, you have problems the rest of your life. Let us give to crop. Let us participate with them as a sign that we love Jesus. Would you pray with me? Almighty God, we ask that you would bless us this day, that you would be with us, that you would empower us and our love for you, that we might truly serve you in all that we do. May we step out today answering that question 3 times, as you asked Peter, "Do you love me?" And with all of our hearts, let us say, "Yes, Lord, I love you." Amen.